This right here is an update, and it's a very brutal update when you think about it. So definitely viewer discretion is advised. I'll put it right there in the title. But this is an update to a story I talked about last year. And I didn't realize how long ago I talked about it until I looked at when I posted it. But last year I talked about these two perverted, and I do mean extremely perverted individuals named Zachary and William Zulak, who are a married couple who adopted two boys. And in that particular video, it was talking about they were making the boys they adopted perform acts, I'll leave it like that, not only with them two, but with each other. But now an update has come out surrounding this story that makes what I talked about in that video seem very amateurish, because this update is even worse. And you thinking to yourself, how could it get any more worse than what I initially talked about? Well, hang on to your seats and to your sanity, because you're about to find out what I mean. So the title reads on the New York Post, it says gay couple charged with molesting their adopted sons, which we already knew. But they also pimped them out to a P ring. I'll put it like that. Y'all know what the P stands for, but to that particular ring. And I think they actually have the images of two other men who was involved with this. But I'm going to pull their pictures up a little bit later. A gay couple from Georgia charged with molesting their two adopted sons and using them to record child or CP. Also allegedly pimped them out to members of a local P ring, according to a disturbing new report. A months-long investigation by Town Hall revealed that William Dale Zulak, age 33, and Zachary Jacoby Zulak, age 35, allegedly used social media to prostitute their two elementary-aged sons. William Zulak, a government worker, and Zachary Zulak, a banker, were indicted in August 2022. It's crazy when I think about the date, how long ago I talked about it. This was, what, 5 months ago, I believe? I'm thinking that it happened, that this was later last year, but when you talk about so many things, sometimes dates and months and weeks can escape you. But let's get back into this. But they were indicted on charges of incest, aggravated sodomy, aggravated child molestation, felony sexual exploitation of children, and felony prostitution of a minor. But the shocking investigation reveals in more detail the sickening abuse of the boys suffered. For the first time, it was revealed that the men allegedly pimped out their older sons, now 11 and 9 years old, to two other men in the ring. One of the men, Hunter Clay Lawless, age 27, told investigators that Zachary, whose Instagram bio describes him as Papa to our two wonderful boys and a quote-unquote activist, invited him multiple times to take part in sexually abusing the boys, Town Hall reported. However, Lawless claimed he never had physical contact with either child. Lawless also claimed Zachary sent him multiple messages on Snapchat, including one that allegedly said, "I'm going to F my son tonight. Stand by." End quote. I kid you not. That's literally what it says right here. Along with images of himself sexually abusing the 11-year-old, according to the outlet. The two men were arrested on charges of soliciting an act of prostitution with the 11-year-old boy, according to the indictment. It's unclear whether Lawless and Armando Vizcarro Sanchez had any physical interactions with the boys. The Zulaks, who lived in Oxford, an affluent suburb of Atlanta, adopted the children from a Christian special needs adoption agency. And just hearing that part right there just lets me know that these boys aren't, what's the word that I'm looking for? It's special needs. So that means that they don't function like other children would naturally function. It says the boys were in the 3rd and 4th grades when their adoptive fathers were arrested last summer. Deputies responding to reports that a man was downloading CP raided the home in Loganville, where they found evidence the pair were engaging in sexually abusive acts and video documenting the abuse. During the raid, William was pulled out of his home naked. The government worker has admitted to forcing one of his sons to perform oral sex on him with the intent to satisfy his own sexual desire. His husband admitted sending child sexual abuse material to several people, according to the news outlet. The couple have been active in the local academy community. Prominent academy publication Out Magazine reportedly asked to feature their photos on its website, according to the Daily Wire. Town Hall said it spent months reviewing recorded jailhouse calls, court documents, and testimony from a relative who spoke exclusively with the outlet about the extent of the abuse, as well as the faster than expected adoption process that led to the nightmare. William and Zachary, who have pleaded not guilty, each face over 9 life sentences if convicted. Well, you know what? They may plead not guilty, but to me, and based on this evidence that has been provided, on top of what else we've already learned, they are guilty as sin. This is absolutely one of the most disturbing stories I have ever read. And you know, the first one that I did back in August was one thing, but they had this double, triple, quadrupled down on the absolute depravity of these two individuals. Now, here's an image of the two guys that I told you I was going to pull their images up of, the Hunter Clay Lawless and the Luis Armando Vizcarra Sanchez. These were the two guys that they say, well, they say allegedly was also involved with what was going on. It says that these two are also in custody. Lawless told police the Zulus offered their boys up to him multiple times. He was arrested after downloading, so on and so. I don't want to reread that. Y'all pretty much get the gist of it. But these are some sick people. And like I said, the academy, they gonna have to say something, because it was always this thing of a lot of people being wary of people who are of the same sex adopting children. And let me just put it like this. I don't want to make a blanket statement and say that every last person who's in a same-sex relationship, married or not or whatever, adopts a child and their child or children end up in a position like this. But it's starting to happen more repetitively. I mean, we had Devontae Hart and what happened with them. Those were 2 women. Then you have this story right here. And it's like, you can't really pinpoint which one is worse than the others, because that one ended in the entire family dying. This one is just complete and utter indecency. And there's many other stories out there that fall into the same one. If y'all remember the one that I did about the 2 women, I believe they were a same-sex couple, and I believe they were in Brazil, and they tried to give their adopted son a operation, quote unquote, to quote unquote turn him into another gender, and he ended up dying. I know some of y'all remember that story. That one, woo, that one was wild as well. That was crazy. Like, they gave that boy a castration to try to turn him into a female, and he died. What kind of psycho sick-ish is going on here? But like I said, it's a lot of weirdos in this world. That's why a lot of people look at people who are in the academy some kind of way when they have kids. Not saying, again, not every person who falls into that category who has children, it acts as the way that they do. But as long as stories like these continue to pop up, people are going to look at them some kind of way. And it's not just, you know, them, even those who are in heterosexual relationships, you know, a lot of them do and act in the same exact vein as well when it comes to the children. But people are going to always look at this community some type of way, because there's always this stain of depravity, being over sexual, and a host of other things. And then when you think about how a lot of them live their life when they don't have children, then when they bring children into the equation, then it's like, oh, now we got to worry. And then if you, to top it off, look at when they have their parades and how a lot of them be having minors out there. So it's not really looking too good for them. And when stuff like this happens, it's just that if you want to engage in these type of activities, don't bring children into it. Do it with people who are of age, 18 and up, consenting adults. Because when you bring children into it, you are no more than a predator. And I noticed that in this article, they didn't call them that. Because one can argue that these 2 men, not these 2, let me pull their pictures back up. One could argue that these 2 men adopt these two boys to turn them into their, I don't even want to say it because it involves minors, but I'm gonna say ex-slaves. Y'all fill in the blanks. Ex-slaves. I think y'all figured out what I'm talking about. One could argue that that's the reason why they adopted them. And you know what? They wouldn't be wrong. It's just, this is sad more than anything. It's sad and just so very, very, very disturbing with these two monsters, because that's really what you have to boil it down to. I can't even bear myself to call them human beings, because what human being would do this to a child? This is the work of something otherworldly, some entity. No person who would call themselves a human being would ever do this to a child, or to anyone for that matter, but especially a child. These children are going to be so messed up for the rest of their lives. But I am glad that they have gotten them out of that situation and have been removed from that for the last 5+ months. Hopefully they got them into some kind of trauma therapy. Hopefully they can find them a good home to go to, so they can make sure that they're good. Now, I'm going to say this to those in the academy and to these adoption agencies. When you think about all of this stuff right here, see, this is the thing about equality. See, when they said we want equality so they can have this and they can have that. Well, if they're going to do investigative background checks when it comes to adopting, especially with heterosexual couples, they need to do the same thing with same-sex couples. Probably based on this and other past transgressions, even more background checks. Like, really. And you can't say, oh, it's being discriminatory. You just have to cross your T's and dot your I's. You can never be too not so hands-on with situations like this, because now it's like it's happening so frequently, and I bet you it's happening in various other avenues as well that are not being reported. Imagine the stories that are not being talked about when it comes to situations such as these, because you know they're not going to cover every story, because granted, realistically speaking, they can't cover all of them. Imagine that. And I don't want to hear any words from the academy talking about this, that's homophobic. No, it's not. I wish one of them would come out and say that. It is not this or that phobic. These two right here, as well as the other two that you saw on the screen about 5 minutes ago, are monsters. They are child predators. And it says that they were part of a ring. So that means that their two children that they adopted were not the only kids. There were others. It's just that they put their own children, the ones that they adopted, into it. That's why I said I would not be surprised if they adopted these kids for the meaning of putting them out there, because it said they pimped their own sons, who are now 11 and 9. They are going to be so messed up. They're going to be so confused. Even with all the therapy that they can get in the world, they're still going to be messed up, because these two right here have traumatized them. They have given them a lifetime's worth of trauma and pain, both mentally and physically. Granted, they'll heal from the physical wounds, but that mental is going to play on them for the rest of their lives. I wouldn't be surprised if one of them grew up and did something heinous. That would be the one time where I said, like, let's hypothetically say that one of them grew up and did something, like committed a big crime, and we found out that they were one of the kids of these two right here. That would be the time where I said, okay, for this instance right here, granted this person did something extremely messed up, I can see why, because these two were responsible. Because a lot of times people throw out that childhood trauma a lot and everything. No, this right here, that what these two kids went through, that was childhood trauma. That is trauma. That I can see. That right there, I can see. I will see exactly why they do that. Granted, I hope that it never gets to that point. But if it does, we see what the foundation, the launch pad, and the catalyst was as to why it got to this point. As for these two and those other two, y'all know my punishment. Put them right there on the slab like for those of you who go to the gym, there's something called a hip abduction machine. And basically how it works is you sit on the machine and you spread, and it spreads your leg out. It's basically like doing Kegel exercises. You do that and it spreads your legs out. Put their on the slab and drop a cinder block on it. That's my punishment for these two and the other two. Anything else, I mean, it is at that point they won't want to live. At that point they'll want to die. But see, you would want them to suffer first. The fact that they are looking at non-life sentences, though, yeah, they're pretty much done, and rightfully so. And one more thing too, I don't know if the Planet Jane will see this video, but maybe I'll send the story to her, because she has a series of videos on her channel where it's called Issues Under the Flag, where she basically talks about stuff that goes on in that community that mainstream media doesn't really like to talk about, or some of the depravity that goes on in there. I hope she gets wind of this story and talks about it at length, because she's really good at breaking this kind of stuff down.